This segment's called For the Love of God. I'm going to be talking about a man named William Monet, spelled M-O-N-E-Y.
Again, everyone here is about money. It's all about the Monet.
It's all about Monet. We are so used to local celebrities in Los Angeles being affiliated with TV or the movies, or some failed attempt at stardom or public notoriety. William Monet goes so far back into old Los Angeles that he's a local celebrity, just his own category. Many thought of this guy as a harmless old crank, like I was talking about before. He's just like some weirdo in town. But he was considered by many as the first eccentric of Southern California, which is a tall order for sure, because California is just like full of weird people. But this is supposedly the first local celebrity of LA. Monet first came to attention to me when I was looking for research for like a really devastating smallpox outbreak of the 1840s, and Monet came up as an eccentric doctor and possible cult leader. Neither of those things are true, but strangely they aren't fake either. William Monet was born in 1807 in Scotland, in either Glasgow or Edinburgh. I read both, really.
The border.
He was born with a caul around his neck. That's like a caul, which is like a membrane that envelops the fetus in utero. Its presence...
Greg, this isn't a medical podcast. Please.
Show me pictures, please.
Its presence was thought to indicate clairvoyance.
I predict,
no. He also had, according to him, the likeness of a rainbow in the right eye.
like David Bowie.
Let's keep in mind, like I was saying before, when it comes to local celebrities, they make up their own legend. They write their own stories. No one is dying to hunt these people down to hear their stories. So they're writing their own heroic ballads and singing them for everyone to hear. His parents had honest enough jobs. His dad was a gardener.
His dad was a con man.
His dad was a con man. His mom was a crook. His dad was a gardener. His mom was a house servant. They regarded their son as having a great mystical power, which is like, ease up. When he was just 7, according to his own account, he began studying natural history, philosophy, law, medicine, and theology. At the age of 12,
he liked dinosaurs. Okay, I get it.
At the age of 12, he apprenticed for a paper manufacturer, and 5 years later, in 1824, Monet left Scotland and arrived in New York City. At the time, when he landed in the big city, it was very anti-Catholic. This was his first glimpse of America, and he thought, I like this. It's said that he may have been in service to a religious reformer, which is where he may have been influenced to push for religious reform. Get rid of Catholicism. Let's start a new thing.
So he wasn't Catholic?
No, he was some other thing.
But he was Irish.
Well, no, he's Scottish.
Oh, okay. That makes they're heathens.
He moved to Sonora, Mexico, where he helped build a paper factory. And
Greg, I said these heathens.
Greg, let's backtrack to what I said about Scotland. We love our Scottish. We love our Scottish fans. We love
so many
Scottish fans.
Edinburgh,
we love
Glasgow,
the rest.
Loch Ness.
The
There's
animated
one big fan.
bagpipes that I love to talk to. He moved to Sonora, Mexico, where he helped build a paper factory. And while he was there, he was known to have public debates with local friars over religion, continuing in Mexico to push for reform. He also spoke Spanish, which a lot of people were like, he spoke Spanish. I'm like, he lived in Mexico. Of course he did. A Catholic clergy regarded him as the most obstinate heretic on the earth. When he came to town, he was said to have been an apprentice or a servant to a scientific man, which is where some people speculate he learned some of those trades, or at least knew how to pass it off as if he knew a lot. One of the bigger debates was against the Roman clergy of the Sonoran village of Pitaquito, which I could not find on a map. It might have been destroyed. Every time I looked up Pitaquito, it just led to William Monet, so it's like tied to him somehow.
Sounds like a cult leader.
Oh yeah, Pitaquito. He made you eat all his bones. This debate, which also concerned abuses from the church, lasted 5 years, 1835 to 1840. Abuses in the church was suggested in the reading, but there was a specific debate happening. The bishop of Caloocan disputed that Monet believed that the Virgin Mary was the mother of Jesus, but not the mother of Christ. Isn't his full name Jesus Christ? I don't know what that means. So anyways, they were really upset with him because he makes his application to
Maybe
God.
Maybe they meant Jesus.
Oh.
This guy Jesus, but not Jesus Christ.
And he's just hanging out here. He's just like helped put the wine in the thing.
Put the wine in the coconut?
And drink it all up because we're in a church and it's okay because it's Christ's blood.
It's not wine, it's blood.
It's not wine, it's blood. It's double gross. Is this blood? No, it's wine. Ugh. So William Monet was, he believed in God but paid no tribute to Virgin Mary, and this upset the Catholics a lot. They debated this for 5 years. The church had 7 disputants. They were known for their glib tongue and subtle imagination, which is something I read, but they're also known for their endurance. The church put up 7 disputants, so 7 people to argue against William Monet, and he outlasted everybody. Like, some people got sick, some people died, unnatural deaths.
Coming back to Lord of the Rings. The 7 were sent out to dispute.
And now they just roam the hillside screaming, dressed in all black.
I can't be out-debated by any man. You debate with a woman.
So he pretty much figuratively destroys these 7 disputants. Mm-hmm. He outmatches all of them, and he took this accomplishment to be a sign of not only his greatness, but now his duty. This is his duty. He was going to preach reform like never before because it was now his purpose on this planet. He proved to be, in his own eyes, out anyways, triumphant. Of course he was. He won a long debate, but it really, like in the big spectrum, doesn't mean anything. And he was so elated and charged up with theological rhetoric that he announced that he'd be leaving Sonora for another Mexican village, a sleepy little pueblo town up north called Los Angeles.
Oh, no.
The year is 1840. The Mexican pueblo is 8 years from becoming an American pueblo. And with Monet, with his handsome, they kept calling this woman handsome. His handsome little wife, Isabel, he met in Mexico City.
Handsome little wife. She's a very honest woman.
She looks very humble. So it's him, his William, his wife, mule. There was mule behind them, and a sack of his belongings. He was said to have ridden into town theatrically, sporting a broad brim hat and sitting upon his mighty steed, which is probably the mule. When they arrived,
A dying donkey.
Please kill me. I used to be a horse. It'd be funny if when horses die, they become mules.
As they get old, they
As they
become
get-
mules. Just like The Mule, starring Clint Eastwood. That's what he's about, right? He's an old man. He looks like a mule.
He looks like a mule now. He used to be a young horse. He used to be a Mustang.
He was a stud.
He was a stud. Oh, boy.
Speaking of cars, he could be a Mustang in my live-action Cars
More like
remake.
the good, and the good.
The good, and the yummy.
When they arrived in town and he was asked what the purpose of his visit was, he said he has come to heal the sick and preach the gospel of the Reformed New Testament church. The area at the time had about 2,000 people, and they were happy to have a doctor in town. There was no doctor.
Is there a doctor in the house? No.
No, not just a doctor, a self-appointed bishop, which he was telling everybody. He claims to be a doctor. I read no thing about him studying medicine. There was no proof at all. He was just came into town like, I think I know medicine. I know how the human body works. In 1958, I'm kind of bearing the lead, but well, in 1958, much later, it's titled-
1958?
Yeah, 1958. He's a time traveler. 1858.
I buried the lead. He's
He's
an immortal time traveler.
He could never die. At some point in 1858, he published a book in Spanish titled "The Treatise on the Mysteries of the Physical System and the Methods of Treating Diseases by Proper Remedies." I wonder what it's about. Clearly, he pontificated on these matters.
Vague title.
Yeah, he was just this liar supreme who went to everybody and was like, I could do everything. I could be a bishop, and also I'm a doctor. He was not a doctor, but the town needed a doctor, so he said he was a doctor. There was also no Protestant church in Los Angeles, and white people needed that to gentrify the area because Protestant churches used to be the yoga, bakery, bike shop, bistro, record shops of their day. Monet didn't assign himself to just bishop or doctor. He was also saying, I know that I'm a bishop, and I know that I'm a doctor.
I'm a bishop.
I'm a doctor. But also, I'm here to just do odd jobs, just to get enough money to stay in town, just proper lodgings, you know? So the city council gave him the task of making repairs on the Plaza Church, which still stands today, for the sum of $126, which is $6 million today. Just kidding.
That's a lot of Corvettes, which were horses back then. Nice pink Mustang.
Nice pink horse. Oh, that's your joke. I saw what you did now.
Nice pink horse. Oh, actually, the breed is a Mustang.
The breed is a Chevy. I wonder when they asked him to repair the church, he was like, I have a repair for your church. Your God is false and your teachings are wrong. Hi, I'm Willie Monet.
Here's the first thing I'm going to fix. And he snaps like a Jesus off of a cross.
He kicks the Virgin Mary off a pedestal. There, it's
praying,
fixed.
yeah.
After one repair job, he was like, I'm better than this, right? I beat the Roman clergy at a debate. I'm better than this handyman crap. Hi, I'm William Monet. He took every given opportunity, apparently, to brag about his education in medicine, theology, astrology.
His fake education.
Yeah, meteorology, cartography, natural history, and economics. But the only school I see him attending was the School of Hard Knocks. It was becoming pretty clear pretty fast to the residents of Los Angeles that they had a fudging liar on their hands. And he soon became the butt of everyone's joke, which is the absolute root of the idea of a local celebrity.
Yeah.
Familiarity,
If the-
ridicule, and odd adoration.
Yeah, if the talk show based in that city at the time can make jokes about you,
Yeah.
then you might be
You
a
might
local
be a little
celebrity.
the butt of a joke, but so far into that, they're like, but we can't live without that butt of a joke. He was deserving of all's ridicule because he went by many different titles around town. Dr. Monet was one, Bishop Monet, Professor Monet. He claimed
And Claude Monet.
and Monet. He claimed that he was an economic theorist, Monet. But of all of these claims, there was nothing more cuckoo banana pants than his idea of the ocean.
Go on.
This-
I got some ideas of the ocean.
This comes much later, but if we're talking about him being eccentric, he submitted an official record to the city, a weird map called the Discovery of the Ocean. According
There's this thing out there. I found it.
I thought it was a lake. It goes on for a long time. All these monsters inside. According to him, a regular smart man, the North Pole at the top sucks in the waters of the whirling ocean. Now, the North Pole confuses a lot of people.
Yeah. It confuses a lot of people
lot of
that
people-
work on this podcast.
A lot of people are confused by the North Pole because they think it's also the South Pole because They think that the globe
It's a flat circle.
is a flat circle. So the North Pole at the top sucks.
That's what Greg thinks, by the way.
I was really hoping they thought it was you.
Just to be clear, it is not me.
I'm really hoping that I thought it was Sparky, the dog that barks, thinks that the North Pole and the South Pole on the same piece of land because
Even Sparky doesn't think that. Sparky knows better.
I'm not going to explain myself to everybody, but I know if you go so far in one direction, you end up on the other side. And I thought it applies to both sides, right? Vertical and horizontal.
If you're on the North Pole, you take one step, you're on the
You're
South
South
Pole,
Pole.
obviously.
So, North Pole at the top sucks in the waters of the whirling oceans. These are heated by fiery regions bordering a subterranean sea. And then there's
It's a hollow earth sort of thing.
Yeah, and then they're spurted out of the South Pole. Here there are two currents marked Kuro-Siwo. Then they lose their heat and rise to the North Pole and repeat the process. His map is
Is he
still
Jules Verne?
You know, he rode on a mechanical hot air balloon.
Into the center of the earth. 20,000 leagues under the center of the earth in 80 days.
William Monet's map is still in Book 2 of the Miscellaneous Records of LA and is submitted without text or explanation. Another reading that it put it a little more simply, there's a hole at the North Pole and it sucks in the waters of the whirling ocean, which pass through the subterranean ocean and are heated by exhaustless fiery regions which border the ocean. Then these heated waters are spurted out into space out of the South Pole. No explanation of what happens. That's basically what he thinks.
And that's where our dirty water goes.
Not only is it the flat Earth, but it's hollow. Like he took all of the
It's a flat,
weird
hollow earth that also has no atmosphere.
He also thought that San Francisco was going to fall into the ocean. He hated San Francisco, by the way. When the newspapers refused to publish his predictions and maps regarding this, William Monet is said to have placed a curse on Los Angeles to have the same fate. Surf's up.
How many people have we gone over that have made curses on the city?
Like at least 6.
Yeah.
So he had odd adoration. People were like, this guy's kooky, but also regular adoration. Because some of the more worldly people of Los Angeles saw right through William Monet, but there are some simple farm folk who really appreciated Dr. Monet. He did have some medical care skills, and he helped the city through a bad smallpox epidemic, which is how I first learned about him. The Reformed New Testament church he had started had 12 members to it. This is the cult everyone says he started, but it was just it's a cult the same way I thought Amy Simple McPherson.
They called themselves Methodists.
One of his favorite boasts was that he, William Monet of Scotland, could rise from the grave. He thought he was Criswell, as a screaming boy while his parents fought.
He thought he was Criswell waking up in the morning.
So he's telling everyone, I could do it. And one day some onlookers decided that he needed to ante up. They wanted to see it.
Someone came up and punched him in the stomach.
Now you're Houdini. So I don't know if they buried him, but they for sure put him in a box.
He was alive?
Yeah.
Well, that's not really rising from the grave. That's escaping from the grave.
They put him in a box and they closed the box and they started shoveling dirt. So I imagine he was probably buried under the ground in a box. And it's
But the earth is flat. He would have gone out into space.
Don't send me into space.
Don't dig too deep.
So they buried him underground and they started throwing dirt on the box that he's buried in. And his exact quote from within the box was, "For the love of God, let me out!" And his audience laughed at him, and he kicked the lid off the box himself and jumped out.
I am risen.
No, was this not a grave? Let me just say it's 2019. Unless he went by several different pseudonyms, William Monet never did rise from the grave. But he sure did rise out of the box and fail the test. It's now 1847, and dedicated meeklings know that a year later, Mexico would lose custody of Los Angeles.
Use of the word.
Thank you. I tried. I wrote it in. Mexico would lose custody of Los Angeles, and they'd lose custody to its new stepdaddy, the United States. William Monet was not into this new home being invaded. He was not into the pressure of having to pick a side. He wasn't even sure what was going to happen when they came and who these Americans were. So he and his wife and they had 3 children. They all fled in a panic back to the Mexican border with all their belongings, their livestock, their goods, all of his writings. He'd been writing his entire life. So he accumulated about 6 large reams of paperwork, just maps and drawings and writings. His life's work. So the path to Mexico they chose rode directly into the arms of the U.S. cavalry. Whoops.
Let's use this beaten trail.
What are all these weird flags with like 13 stripes? A diary exists from the Dragoon medic, and they found an entry which described Monet as an old fellow with all his family and horses fleeing from the country to Sonora. So, like, it's funny. The Dragoon, which was led by General Stephen Kearny, he's a famous person who invaded Los Angeles, they forcibly took the Monets back to Los Angeles, which is so funny because he fled Los Angeles, California of Mexico and ended up at Los Angeles, California of the United States. But being forcibly returned to LA, it was thought that General Kearny may have thought that the 6 reams that Monet was carrying were documents to Mexican authorities. So fearing that the enemy might get an upper hand, he destroyed destroyed 26 years of labor from Monet, his life's work, drawings and maps. He just destroyed them. At this point, he began writing.
All nonsense anyway.
It was probably, and under the earth, there's lizard people. And there was.
So you're going to tell Mexico about our lizard people. Oh, no.
At this point, Monet began writing editorials about the matter to Los Angeles Star, which we covered a little bit in the last episode of early newspaper. He also headed to Washington to sue the federal government for $250,000 over the loss of his life's work. Did not get the money, but I'll tell you what he did get: divorced. When he returned to Los Angeles a few years later,
We'll counter your offer.
How about you're single now? Interesting. Go on. So it's a few years later he comes back from Washington back to Los Angeles. His wife Isabel had married a Frenchman named Pierre Pedro Abarta, and they had a child together. And that's why you don't fight the government. So this is a side story. His wife separates from him. She goes on. She marries this French guy Abarta. They have 6 children, including a daughter named Lastania. Lastania has an incident that deserves its own segment on a future episode, but we'll just sum it up real quick. In 1881, Lastania shot her seducer Chico Forrester in the streets in front of witnesses. Forrester, by the way, was the son of John Forrester, SoCal's richest land baron and a former LA County supervisor. They took the case to trial, and her defense attorneys presented 12 male jurors with forensic evidence and expert scientific testimony that their client should be acquitted by the reason of menstrual madness. And it worked. It took the all-male jury 20 minutes to find that Lastania Abarta had been insane at the time of the shooting because she was on her period.
Menstrual madness.
Menstrual madness.
That's another part of that carnival in Denver that got destroyed.
I also read that on the trip when they were trying to flee American troops and they're going back to Mexico, William and Isabel suffered the loss of their little son, although not much is mentioned on the matter. But all the accounts about him coming back were like he lost his life's work. He lost all his paperwork. And like one thing was like, oh yeah, his son died on the way. Anyways, so the Los Angeles Star was new at the time. Started up in 1851. He had already been like a local for like 10 years at this point. So they were looking for content. And Monet was happy to provide that and apparently wrote voluminous letters to the editor, usually accompanied by a sarcastic editorial, probably like a rubric like, okay, we is Criswell in his day. He also wrote about his religious and medical invective. It was probably in the spirit of local celebrity ridicule and backtalk giggling that they decided to publish his manuscripts in book form. The Reform of the New Testament Church by W.M. Monet, deacon and defender of the faith of Jesus Christ. The year was 1854, and this was the first book published in Los Angeles ever by William Crazy Pants Monet.
It took that long to publish a book?
I guess so.
I guess people have more pressing things to do.
Yeah, they wanted...
like pressing olives.
Pressing paper, cleaning caca out of the river. The preface, which is autobiographical, has a line in it that most people concentrate on. By a singular circumstance, I was born with 4 teeth and the likeness of a rainbow in my right eye, which 4 teeth was like not included before.
Being born with any teeth is weird, isn't it? You don't get your teeth right away.
No.
You have to save a guy from suicide to get your teeth. Every time a bell rings, a baby gets its teeth.
Full grin. The book, of course, was panned and denounced, and he went on a series of retaliative attacks against his naysayers, which was the Catholic Church, a Mormon patriarch, and all of the denominations in general. He went back to the Star to have his 300-page religious manuscript printed, but they gave him a hard no. He was able to set up a monthly issue periodical thing called the Christian Church, published through the El Clamor Publico, which was the Spanish press. Only one issue came out. In 1857, Monet moved to the San Gabriel area and started building an adobe house with a double entrance gate and inscriptions in Greek and Latin and Hebrew. It was a weird octagonal little thing. Every time people talk about his place, they're like, it's kind of weird shape. Monet was called it the Monetan Institute. His neighbors call it Monet's Castle. It was off of Mission Drive near Las Tunas Drive. I can't get specifics, probably because there weren't like roads at the time. Like it was just like in the middle of 2 Taco Bells or something.
Follow that tree.
Yeah, exactly. It's about that big rock that we can't
the
move.
2 Taco Bells and this guy.
In 1863, another devastating smallpox outbreak was sweeping across the Southland. Black Maria is coming. During that outbreak, Monet used his medical care know-how to treat residents, although because he was not licensed and was an armchair doctor, no one really took him seriously. He had this claim that like, I've treated 5,000 people and only 4 of them died.
I mean, survived.
In 1880, he was interviewed by historian H.H. Bancroft, which is a guy where so much California history comes from. According to Bancroft, Monet tried to use his opportunity to be interviewed by his historian to sell a manuscript for $1,000, and Bancroft was like, no. In so many words.
Always hustling.
Yeah.
In the name of God. Hustling in the name of God.
For the love of God. His castle, which is a cluttered oval-shaped house, sometimes used as a public school and later was the headquarters of the Monet Society, always add something, which was a group of Mexican and native Californians who banded together for social and benevolent purposes, like a gentleman's club.
Oh, boy.
Ooh, yummy, yummy. Ooh,
God. Oh, my goodness, I got a 63.
I gotta brush my 4 teeth.
Let me polish my rainbow.
Monet died in 1881 alone.
My 4 teeth.
He was all alone. As it was put by Cecilia Rasmussen, I always say your name wrong, I'm sorry. He died with the image of the Holy Virgin above his head, an articulated skeleton at his feet, and a well-worn copy of a Greek classic within the reach of his hand. After his death...
Wait, what? Why did he have a skeleton at his feet, and why was the Virgin Mary, who he hated, above him?
Because he's weird. I don't get anything this
He
guy
was in
does.
Criswell's room.
Criswell suite. After his death, his books and papers were lost. The Huntington Library might be the only institution to have the lasting copy of his 22-page book, the first book ever published in Los Angeles. At the bottom of the title page of his book, first published book in LA, it reads, "When you see this, remember me, W.M." That's William Monet.
Interesting. It's kind of like Breaking Bad.
It's like Breaking Bad.
Well, you haven't seen that far.
No, it's Breaking Bad.